Have you ever met someone with silver hair and a hunched back, but with the emotional maturity of a child? They still get angry easily, still want to win every argument, still can't control their emotions. So it makes you wonder, is old age just a number, or is it something deeper? In a world where everyone is trying to stay young, covering up gray hair and fearing weakness in aging, there are a few who choose a different path. They look straight into the reality of death, not with fear, not with denial, but with preparation. With every kind act, every mindful step, every whispered prayer, they get ready. And somewhere, in the chaos of modern life, there are people who still quietly live with integrity. They hold back their impulses. They prepare for a peaceful departure. They don't need to be kings or be reborn in heaven. They just want to grow old, the right way, and become someone their family can look up to. So, what does it really mean to grow old? At what point are we considered old? And how can we, as the evening of our life approaches, become a source of shade and comfort for our children and grandchildren instead of a burden? Let's reflect on these questions together. Because old age isn't the end. It's an art of living with wisdom and compassion. 1. A truly wise elder knows how to manage their emotions. Once, during a meditation retreat, a middle-aged woman sat across from the teacher, her voice lowered, her eyes welled up with tears. She said her father, now over 80, still loses his temper over the smallest things. One wrong word from the grandkids, a slight change in schedule, and he's slamming the table, shouting at everyone. Why is he still so angry even at his age? She asked. That question made everyone in the room pause and look inward. Because aging isn't just about the years we've lived. It's about how we've lived. There are people who look elderly from the outside, but inside, their hearts are still as reactive as a child's. They get offended easily, sulk when things don't go their way, lash out when misunderstood. True elders aren't defined by gray hair or shaking hands. A true elder is someone who's learned to manage their emotions, someone who can stay calm when insulted, who can smile through misunderstanding, who can hold back a sharp word not out of weakness, but out of deep understanding. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "One who does not retaliate with anger, who remains calm even when criticized, such a person is truly wise." Staying calm doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've learned to place your emotions in the right place, at the right time, in the right way. A wise elder knows not every feeling needs to be expressed, and not everyone deserves your anger. Imagine this. It's a cold afternoon. An old man is sitting quietly on a park bench. Two kids are playing soccer nearby. One kicks too hard, and the ball hits the old man's leg. He flinches in pain. The boy runs over, nervous and mumbling an apology. Now, someone who's quick-tempered might yell, scold, make the child cry. But the old man simply nods, smiles, and says, "It's okay. Just be careful next time, all right?" Then he closes his eyes and takes a deep breath. And with that breath, the pain seems to dissolve too. That is what it means to be truly old. Not just in age, but in spirit. Someone who has trained their mind long enough that emotions no longer control their actions. Someone who's lost and gained enough in life to know that inner peace is worth more than winning any argument. There's a famous Buddhist story about emotional control. Long ago, a monk lived quietly in the forest. He was gentle and calm, everyone respected him. One day, a rude man came and shouted insults at him non-stop. The monk said nothing. Frustrated, the man yelled, "I've been insulting you for half an hour. Why aren't you angry?" The monk smiled. "If someone offers you a gift but you don't accept it, who does it belong to?" The man replied, "To the one who offered it." The monk said, "Exactly. I don't accept your insults. So they still belong to you." That's when emotions stop being something we throw at others and become something we choose to accept or not. That is the start of wisdom. An elder isn't someone who's never felt anger. They're someone who's learned to rise above it, who no longer explodes over little things, who no longer uses harsh words as a weapon, who no longer passes their pain onto others. A true elder doesn't make others feel afraid. They make others feel safe. The older we get, the more we need our emotions to settle like a lake after the storm. It may be muddy at first, but if we let it be, it will clear. One elder once shared, "I used to think that being old meant I had the right to be grumpy, that if I was tired, I could snap. If someone made a mistake, I could scold. But one day I saw my granddaughter flinch at the look on my face, and I realized I wasn't aging the way I should." Old age doesn't need to be sharp to feel respected. It needs to be kind to be remembered. A true elder is someone younger people can lean on, not because they're strong, but because they're steady. They don't let moods ruin conversations. They don't let frustration break relationships. They don't let their own wounds become others' pain. Because they understand. Life is already short. Don't let anger make it shorter. The heart is already tender. Don't let ego tear it further. And when death comes, we won't carry arguments or grudges with us. The only thing that matters then is whether we leave in peace. That's why a true elder holds themselves with grace, steady in joy, grounded in sorrow, light in the face of hardship. That strength doesn't come overnight. It's forged over time through failures, through loss. A respected elder has fallen, but doesn't blame, has hurt, but doesn't harden, has loved and lost, but still keeps their heart open. Because wisdom doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand obedience. It speaks through presence, through a listening gaze, through a calm that fills the room. That is the art of aging. And that art is something we must practice over a lifetime. You can't age gracefully if you live recklessly in your youth. You can't be calm at 70 if anger led the way at 30. Old age is not a break from life. It's the moment we shine from within. Like the full moon, it makes no sound. Yet its light guides the traveler home. And when an elder can hold their emotions with care, they don't just save themselves. They save their loved ones from unnecessary pain, from conflicts that leave silent scars, from harm that could have been avoided. Because in any family, the elder is the heart. If that heart is tense, everyone feels it. But if that heart is calm, others will feel safe enough to be open. So if you're in your 42nd or 52nd, start learning how to be old today. And if you're already past 60, then age with dignity, not by number, but by inner nobility. Because in the end, a life isn't measured by how long it lasted, but by how deep it touched others. And even if you have just a few years left, if you live with grace, it's more than enough to be a guiding light for the generations after you. 2. Aging is not about years. It's about wisdom, maturity, and life experience. People often ask, at what age are we considered old? And most will give a number. Some say 60, others say 70. Some define aging by gray hair, blurry vision, shaky hands, or a hunched back. But if we stop there, that idea might be far too simple and, in many cases, just plain wrong. There are people in their 72nd who still live like they never grew up. Emotionally reactive, quick-tempered, saying harsh things when they're upset. And then there are 3 0-year-olds whose calm, presence, thoughtful responses, and emotional maturity make you feel like you're sitting across from an old wise soul. So maybe aging has less to do with the calendar and more to do with the depth of the mind. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said something deeply powerful. Though one may live 100 years without understanding the truth of arising and ceasing, it's better to live even one day with insight into impermanence. A person is only truly old when they begin to understand impermanence, when they no longer chase every twist of fate, when they stop trying to prove who they are, and instead live to understand, to love, and to let go. There was once a doctor who shared this insight. He'd worked with elderly patients for years, but not all of them felt like elders. Some were over 80, but when he entered the room, they would complain, scold, or snap at the nurses. Others in their 62nd would greet him kindly, speak gently, and even ask, "Doctor, are you doing okay today?" And the doctor once said, with surprising honesty, "Not everyone who's old has grown up. Some people age, but never mature." See, real maturity doesn't come from time. It comes from life experience, from falling down and learning how to stand back up without blaming, from listening instead of reacting, from choosing peace over pride. A 30-year-old who takes responsibility for their words, who stays calm to preserve family harmony, and who puts the greater good above ego, might be more aged than a 70-year-old who's still arguing over who gets the last bite of food at dinner. In Buddhism, age isn't a measure of virtue. The Buddha once honored a young novice monk who was wise, respectful, and self-reflective, telling his older disciples to treat this young monk as a true elder. A true elder, the Buddha said, is one who has virtue and wisdom, not merely someone advanced in age. So, aging is a quality of how we live, not how long we've lived. A mature person knows when to speak, and when silence is more powerful. They know what's worth worrying about and what's not. They can feel anger, but not let it damage the people they love. They may not talk much, but when they do, their words carry weight. They don't need to show off. Their presence alone brings peace. Think of a quiet grandmother who sits by the window with tea, watching the garden, gently teaching her grandkids not through lectures, but through how she listens, how she smiles, how she simply is. That kind of maturity no school can teach. It's something that ripens inside the heart over time. Just like fruit on a tree, not everything ripens with age. Some fruits get sweeter in the sun, others rot from within. People are the same. Without mindfulness, time just brings habits, not wisdom. A truly mature person may have once argued, once hurt, once competed, but eventually they come to a point where those things don't seem worth it anymore. They can walk away from conflict without feeling like they've lost. They can hear harsh words and not react, because they understand reacting is instinct, but staying calm is strength. Life experience isn't just about surviving the years, it's about learning from them. After heartbreak, some people shut down. Others open their hearts wider, speak more gently, and judge less. That's when you know they're aging gracefully. Wise elders don't live based on emotions. They live through awareness and understanding. The Buddha once compared the wise to a still lake. Even when the wind blows, the surface stays calm. Even when dust falls, the water remains clear. That's someone who has trained their mind, who no longer lets the outside world control their peace. And that peace makes them a source of refuge, not because they give endless advice, but because their way of being teaches more than words ever could. Here's a quiet truth. In today's world, older people aren't always honored the way they once were. The young move fast, adapt quickly, make money early, and that can make elders feel forgotten. But that doesn't make them useless. A tree may no longer bear fruit, but its shade still offers shelter no one else can provide. A mature elder knows they don't have to compete with the young. They don't need the spotlight. They don't try to act young again. They accept the season they're in without losing their dignity. And that acceptance, that's where true peace begins. But if someone grows old, still trying to be the center of every gathering, still needing to be right, still unwilling to let go, then that kind of aging is a little tragic. As someone once said, we don't grow old because of age. We grow old when we stop learning, stop letting go, and stop loving with an open heart. So, if someone at 30 knows how to live with responsibility, mindfulness, and compassion, they've already started aging beautifully. And if someone at 70 is still clinging to power, pride, and petty arguments, then sadly, they've only grown older, not wiser. Real aging is about shedding, letting go of ego, letting go of resentment, letting go of what doesn't matter, and holding on to what does. Kindness, understanding, and a peaceful heart. When you see someone who no longer needs to argue to feel valid, who doesn't need to shout to be heard, who doesn't need to win to be respected, that's when you know they've truly aged with grace. 3. A wise elder is someone who seriously reflects on death, sees beyond this one life, and prepares for a peaceful passing through merit, morality, and faith in the three jewels. There's one truth that no one can escape, but very few people truly want to face: death. Most of us, when we're younger, see death as something far away, like a story that belongs to someone else, something that might happen someday, but definitely not today. That is, until one day, we notice our parents growing weaker. A friend our age passes unexpectedly. We ourselves begin to feel it, knees aching, eyes dimming, memory slipping. And suddenly the idea of the final day starts to enter our awareness, quietly, without warning, just a passing thought, but enough to make us pause. An elder, a truly wise one, is someone who can look directly at that truth, not avoid it, not deny it, not pretend that it won't happen, because it will. And how we leave this life with peace or pain, with fear or calm, depends on how we prepare. The Buddha said in the Anguttara Nikaya, "The wise, before death arrives, should do good, for life is uncertain, and death is certain." A wise elder doesn't see impermanence as a tragedy, but as motivation to live more beautifully with the time that remains. I remember a 75-year-old man once came forward and asked, "Is there anything left for me to do? I feel like my life is almost over." The answer, gently given, was this: there's still so much, as long as, starting today, you begin to see life more deeply, not just for this life, but for what comes after. Death isn't the end. For a spiritual practitioner, death is just a transition, a doorway between two journeys of rebirth. That's why those who practice don't just prepare for a funeral, they prepare for what comes next. And that preparation? It's not about money, savings accounts, or a reputation. It's about morality, good deeds, a kind heart, and unshakable faith in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. If, day by day, we live with kindness, not harming others, not speaking cruelly, not planting seeds of suffering, then we're already building a bright road for the next life. If every small act helping someone, easing another's burden, supporting monastics, cultivating faith, is done with sincerity, then even if death comes suddenly, we won't feel lost or fearful, because the heart already knows where it's going. It's like lighting a lamp in the dark. When death arrives like a shadow, a spiritual heart doesn't panic because the light is already within. A wise elder doesn't live just to earn more, keep more, cling more. They live to give, to offer wisdom, compassion, understanding, and the merits they've accumulated as a blessing to all beings. There's a touching story in the Karaniya Metta Sutta tradition. Long ago, a poor blacksmith lived an honest life, humble, not particularly famous. When he knew his time was near, he didn't cry or panic. He made one final request: to hear the monks chant the Dharma before his passing. As he breathed his last hands in prayer, his heart was fully focused on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Because of his sincerity and deep faith, he was reborn in a peaceful realm. That story reminds us even a simple life, if lived with moral integrity and faith, can be a truly noble one. A wise elder knows nothing follows us after death except karma. Good or bad, it's all what we create. And the beautiful truth is, as long as we're alive, we can still change. Some people live 60 years off track, but if they spend the last few years wisely, that's enough to turn the ship around. Others live virtuously their whole lives, but a mistake near the end can still cause suffering. That's why this moment is always the door we can return through. A wise elder doesn't fear death because they've learned how to live. They don't cling to life because they understand every extra day is a chance to do good, not a reason to collect more worries. And a truly awakened elder is someone who looks at death not with dread, but with calm readiness. For them, death isn't something sad. It's a transition welcomed with a peaceful heart. And once we can see it that way, every day we have left becomes precious. Not a time to be bitter, to hold grudges, or to dwell on the past, but a time to slow down, to go deeper, to live with the full weight and grace of being human. As we grow older, we should live more lightly, not because we're too tired to fight, but because we finally see that fighting doesn't matter. Not because we feel less, but because we've learned that peace of mind is the greatest reward we can take with us. A wise elder is someone who chooses their death, not the hour, but the state of heart. To die with mindfulness, with gentleness, with full preparation in virtues, in merit, and in faith, is to leave the body, but keep the mind rooted in peace. And in that space, death is no longer frightening. It becomes a gate opening to the next land, the next chapter in the path of awakening. So if you still think death is a taboo topic, maybe the Dharma hasn't really sunk in yet. If you still avoid talking about death, you might still be living like life is forever. But the moment you start speaking of death, thinking about it seriously, and using it as a reason to live more kindly each day, that's when you've truly begun to grow old in the best way. 4. Growing old doesn't mean desire disappears, but learning to restrain it is a sign of inner maturity. People often assume that when we get old, all desires simply fade away, that somehow aging will just take care of our cravings. But the truth? Desire, especially sensual desire, doesn't vanish just because the body grows weaker or the hair turns gray. It's still there. Quieter maybe, more hidden, but often more subtle and more powerful in the way it influences us. That's why aging doesn't mean we've outgrown desire. It just means we're in a better position to see it clearly and hopefully learn how to restrain and transform it. In the middle-length discourses, the Buddha said, "The root of the cycle of birth and death is craving. If craving is not uprooted, this cycle cannot be ended." Now, this doesn't mean that feeling love or attraction is wrong. Not at all. The Buddha wasn't condemning emotion. He was pointing out that unchecked craving is the root of suffering. It makes us cling, possess, feel jealous, feel disappointed. It drags the heart through turmoil. A wise elder, someone who has lived, stumbled, learned, doesn't try to suppress desire, and they don't pretend it no longer exists. What they do is transform that energy into compassion, into kindness, into unconditional love. Someone once said, "When you're young, love makes you want to hold on to someone. When you're older, love makes you want to bless them and let them go. Sounds gentle, but that's true emotional maturity. There's a story in the Buddhist tradition about a layman in his 62nd. After his wife passed away, friends encouraged him to remarry because he was still lonely. At first, he was confused. He found himself drawn emotionally stirred by a younger woman he met at the temple. But instead of letting desire lead the way, he paused, Saturday with his thoughts, reflected deeply. What is this feeling? Is it craving or genuine appreciation? If it's craving, is it really worth pursuing? And if it's respect, is there a way to honor that feeling without causing harm? In the end, he chose a different path. Rather than entering a new relationship, he transformed that affection into spiritual mentorship. He became someone who guided and uplifted others, not because he eliminated craving, but because he understood it and walked through it with wisdom. You see, being old doesn't mean we no longer feel desire. It means we're no longer dragged around by it. Why? Because at some point we start to see what younger people haven't fully realized yet. That desire never truly ends. It just changes form. One craving leads to another. When we're young, we chase beauty. Later, we crave status. As we age, we yearn for affection, attention, to still feel attractive. But in the end, it's all just different shapes of the same cycle. And the more we chase, the more exhausted we become. Inner freedom begins the moment we stop letting instincts control our behavior. And that is what gives an elder their true grace. Such a person, even if they still feel stirred by emotion, knows how to return to mindfulness. They may feel moved, but they stay grounded. They might feel lonely, but they don't let that loneliness push them into poor decisions. In meditation practice, there's a beautiful approach to handling desire. Don't suppress it. Just look at it. Watch it rise. Watch it take over the mind. Watch it fade. And keep doing this again and again until your own heart starts to realize, this is just a passing mental state, not real, not permanent. I don't have to follow it. Elders often have more access to this kind of insight because they've already been through so many heartbreaks, so many disappointments, so many one-sided affections. And now, they start to realize, sometimes, a love that's held gently with compassion, not possession, is more beautiful than a love that tries to control. An elderly man who's adored by his grandkids isn't adored because he's emotionless. He's adored because he doesn't let emotions get in the way of kindness. When his grandson brings a girlfriend home, he smiles, welcomes her with warmth, not out of insecurity, not to show he's still got it, but out of genuine care. That's not the absence of love. That's mature love. Desire, when restrained and transformed, becomes a powerful energy, a protective, nurturing force. The elderly may no longer have physical strength. But if they've cultivated inner peace, if they've learned to redirect that energy into boundless compassion, they become pillars of the family and the community. They become the ones others turn to, the ones others want to confide in, not out of obligation, but because being near them feels safe. They create boundaries not to push others away, but to protect clarity and wholesomeness. Because without that restraint, old age can become a little tragic. Elders who desperately try to seem seductive, who chase relationships that don't fit anymore just to feel wanted, often become subjects of gossip, even pity. But the ones who know how to restrain themselves become icons of dignity, of timeless beauty. And that beauty doesn't lie in smooth skin or dark hair. It shines in a quiet gaze that knows when not to speak, in the calmness that stays steady even when stirred by emotion, in the way they love without needing love in return. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Better than conquering 1,000 armies is conquering oneself." And desire craving is one of the fiercest armies we ever face. Not so we can destroy it, but so we can transform it into something that feeds the spiritual path. An elder who still knows how to love without clinging is beautiful. An elder who can still be moved by beauty but isn't trapped by it is powerful. Because when desire is tamed, it becomes loving kindness. And that loving kindness is what makes aging sacred. 5. Aging gracefully means passing things on, not holding on to power or possessions. In a quiet village by the mountains, there was an old man who lived in a humble house made of wood and stone. Every day, he tended to a small garden, carefully growing rows of vegetables. Sometimes, he'd call his grandchildren over to teach them how to plant, water, and care for the earth. One day, a visitor came by and asked, "Why do you still garden? You probably won't live long enough to enjoy those vegetables." The old man smiled and replied, "You're right. I'm not doing it for myself. I plant so the kids will learn how to care for the soil." You see, there are some elders who, even at the very end of life, still refuse to let go. They hold on tightly to power, to possessions, to being the final voice in every family decision, even the smallest ones. Sometimes it's out of habit, but often it's fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of being replaced or forgotten. But here's the truth. Letting go is not the same as giving up. Letting go when done with love and clarity is one of the deepest ways we prepare for what comes next. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Do what is good and do not delay. Those who hesitate in doing good are easily led by the unwholesome." And one of the greatest good things an elder can do is to pass things on. Not just money or belongings, but wisdom, values, patience, and the life experience that only time can offer. Imagine a single flame lit in the dark. If you keep it to yourself, it will flicker out. But if you use that flame to light other torches, the light will continue long after you're gone. Aging is short if we only live for what time we have left. But if we pass something on even a little, we continue living through those who come after. I've seen families where elders held on too tightly. When they passed away suddenly, everything fell apart. Children fought over inheritance. Siblings turned against each other. Organizations collapsed because there was no clear successor. And all that was built vanished, like dust in the wind. But wise elders, they don't wait until their deathbed to hand things off. They prepare early. They don't feel threatened by sharing authority. They see it as a blessing. Because when you have something worth passing on, it means your life has value. A respected old monk once said that in his final years, what brought him peace wasn't the number of students he had, but the few who truly understood his heart. Some picked up where he left off. Some could sense what he meant even without him saying a word. And because of that, he had no fear of death. He knew the fire would keep burning. If we look ahead, we'll all see one thing clearly. Everything we own will eventually be passed on to someone else. Money, houses, status, whether we like it or not, it'll happen. So why not do it mindfully, while we're still clear-headed and strong? Because if we wait until we're helpless and others have to make the choices for us, then what we leave behind may not be a legacy, but a mess. In the Sikkhalavada Sutta, the Buddha once praised a king not because he ruled with might, but because he passed the throne to his son while he was still healthy and wise. He knew that if the next generation isn't trained early, the whole kingdom could collapse. That's the wisdom of aging with foresight. Passing things on isn't just for kings or spiritual leaders. It's for everyone in every family, in every community. A grandmother teaching her granddaughter how to sew. A grandfather showing his grandson how to treat neighbors with kindness. A father teaching his child how to really listen. That's transmission. And when those teachings are remembered and passed on, the elder never truly dies. Wise elders don't need their names carved into stone. Their legacy is etched into the hearts of the young through how they lived. Some people leave behind land, or companies, or big houses. Others leave behind a notebook full of heartfelt teachings. And sometimes that notebook is worth far more. In one of his teachings, the Buddha said, "No one should live without a spiritual heir." He meant, if you've seen truth, if you've lived kindly, if you've gained wisdom, don't keep it to yourself. You don't need a stage or a microphone. Just live it. And someone watching quietly will learn. Because if we hoard what we know and die with it locked away, the seeds in us will never sprout. Passing things on is also a form of letting go. The more you hold, the heavier you feel. The more you give, the lighter you become. And here's the beautiful part. When you're willing to let go, people don't forget you, they honor you. You don't need to shout or command to be respected. A gentle silence at the right moment, a calm presence, a loving example, those things guide the next generation far more than any order or rule. Growing old doesn't mean winning every argument. It means winning the trust of the young. And to do that, we must be willing to pass the torch, not to disappear, but to make room for others to rise. There's an old monastery in the countryside. The abbot, now elderly, no longer gives long talks. He simply sits in his woven chair under a tree each day, watching the younger monks do their work. He doesn't interfere. He doesn't criticize. Every now and then, he says one quiet thing, and it makes everyone pause and reflect. And the monks say to each other, "The master no longer teaches with words, he teaches with his presence." That is the highest form of transmission. 6. The compassion of the elderly, understanding instead of blaming, loving instead of judging. In a quiet countryside village, there lived an old woman in a modest wooden house. The locals called her the Keeper of Peace, not because she did anything grand, but because whenever someone in the village made a mistake, she didn't scold them. She'd quietly go to their home, talk with them, ask how they were doing, and tell a simple story, often about a mistake she herself had once made. Someone once asked her, "Why don't you ever get angry? Why don't you blame them?" She smiled gently and said, "Because I've been there too. The only difference is, I'm just a little older now." There's a quiet truth that only age can reveal. The older we get, the easier it becomes to forgive. Not because we've forgotten the pain, not because we're too tired to argue, but because we understand. We understand that everyone has messed up at some point, that people hurt others, not always out of cruelty, but because they weren't ready, weren't wise, weren't aware. We understand that we too have made mistakes. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Not one among us is without fault, but those who recognize their faults and change their ways are worthy of respect." When we're young, we judge quickly. We think, "How could he do that? Why would she treat me like this? I'll never forgive them." But as we get older, after hurting others and being hurt ourselves, we begin to see the fragile nature of being human. We stop rushing to label people right or wrong. We learn to pause just for a breath before we speak. There's an old Buddhist story about a young monk who saw a man in the village stealing. He was furious. He went straight to his teacher and said, "Master, that man's a thief. We should kick him out. He's not worthy." The elder monk sat silently for a while, then asked, "Are you certain you've never taken anything that wasn't yours?" The young monk paused. After thinking for a moment, he admitted, "When I was a kid, I once picked fruit from someone else's tree." The master nodded kindly. "And if they had kicked you out then, would you be here today, learning the Dharma?" That story isn't about justifying wrongdoing. It's about remembering that forgiveness is wisdom. An elder who has truly practiced doesn't use their age to control others. They use their experience to understand. And from that place of understanding, they speak in a way that younger folks can hear without feeling judged. Compassion isn't weakness. It's a quiet strength. And it takes real inner work to offer it sincerely. Sadly, there are older folks who become the powerful shadow in the family. They keep bringing up old mistakes. They dwell in the past. They blame their children or grandchildren again and again, until those around them stop sharing, avoid conversations, or just go silent, not out of respect, but out of emotional exhaustion. But there are also elders who barely speak, and yet every word they say feels like a warm hug. They don't judge. They don't shame. When their loved ones mess up, they don't say, "I told you so." They just pour a quiet cup of tea, sit down beside them, and begin a gentle story, often about their own scars, long since healed. A wise elder doesn't see someone else's mistake and feel superior. They feel lucky to have made it through that same path. And now, they have a chance to help someone else find their way. One elderly Buddhist once shared at our monastery, "When I was younger, I was so harsh with people. I thought being good meant being strict black or white, right or wrong. But the older I get, the more I realize life isn't always so clear. I've made mistakes too, and it was someone else's compassion that helped me grow. And the moment we realize we've been forgiven, that's when we begin to forgive others." The Buddha never turned away those who had made mistakes. Among his disciples were former criminals, even killers. His only condition was this: do you truly want to change? If the answer was yes, he received them with full compassion. There's a famous story of Angulimala, a ruthless murderer who had taken many lives. But through a single gaze of non-judgment, through just one sentence of kindness, he stopped, dropped his weapon, became a monk, and eventually an enlightened being. The miracle wasn't just that he changed. The miracle was that compassion planted a new seed inside him. A seed of hope, a seed of transformation. And the elderly, more than anyone, have the fertile soil to help such seeds grow. Because they've lived, they've seen, they've felt. They know. When we choose compassion, we don't just save the other person. We save ourselves from bitterness, from the heavy burden of resentment. True maturity isn't about making people afraid to mess up around you. It's about being able to stay soft, even when they do. A wise elder doesn't react from emotion. They see the wrong but don't rush to scold. They see the foolishness but don't rush to shame. They understand that today's mistake might just be part of tomorrow's awakening. And if they offer the right word, or even just the right look, it might change the entire direction of someone's life. No need to shout. No need for control. Just understanding and love. In the evening of life, after walking through countless storms of anger and frustration, we don't need to win anymore. We just want peace. Not winning the argument. Not winning the world. But winning over our own hearts. To rise above pettiness, ego, and pride. To live each day light. And to leave behind a sense of ease for others. Because in the end, what people remember isn't how many times we were right. They remember how gently we held them when they were wrong. 7. Don't wait until you're old to live like the wise. Start practicing virtue while you're young. In today's world, there's a common but deeply mistaken belief that we only need to slow down, reflect, practice letting go, or live with compassion after we get old. But when you really think about it, that's already too late. Because no one becomes a wise elder overnight. Ethics, compassion, and wisdom, they aren't things we stumble into by aging. They're the result of quiet, consistent, and mindful effort, started when we're still young. If we don't start planting those seeds early, then when old age arrives, we won't just be physically weak, we'll be emotionally and mentally worn out too. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "An old person with wisdom and virtue is like a lotus blooming unstained in muddy water. But an old person without wisdom is like a withered tree in the desert." Old age doesn't magically give us dignity. It simply amplifies what we've been cultivating all along. People often think, "I'm still young. I should enjoy life first and maybe practice later." But the truth is, there's no such thing as practice later. Spiritual growth or mindful living needs to begin while the mind is still sharp, still willing to reflect, still open enough to grow. Because by the time old age comes, the body is tired, and the mind has hardened. Change becomes so much harder. You see this in real life. Many elders still carry deep anger, selfishness, comparison, and stubbornness. Not because they're old, but because they never practiced when they were young. If someone has spent half a lifetime chasing desires, competing with others, and hoarding possessions, those habits become heavy baggage in old age, baggage they can no longer set down. On the other hand, someone who starts walking the path early, who doesn't wait until life knocks them down to begin transforming, that person becomes a refuge for others in their later years, for their family, their children, and their community. There's a beautiful image in Buddhism, the Bodhi tree. When it's just a sprout, the wind can easily knock it over. But if nurtured early, it grows tall, its roots deepen, its trunk strengthens, and its shade extends far and wide. A virtuous person is the same. They don't wait until the sunset of life to seek light. They begin at the dawn of awareness. Just like education, no one waits until retirement to learn how to read. Cultivating inner qualities should also begin early. When the heart is still soft, it's easier to shape. Once it hardens, it's much harder to bend. And in reality, there are people in their 32nd who already carry calmness, maturity, and the ability to truly listen. They don't need to act wise or assert their age. Their presence alone makes others feel safe. That's not because of age, but because they've lived like wise elders since youth. And sadly, there are people in their 62nd who are still reckless, restless, reactive, and lacking compassion. It shows us that without early practice, age only reveals our inner limitations more clearly. At a Dharma talk in the Western U.S., a young practitioner once asked, "Master, I'm still young. Where should I start my practice?" The teacher smiled and said, "Start by learning how to be old." Everyone laughed at first, but then silence filled the room, because they realized that was a deeply wise answer. To be old doesn't mean moving slowly or acting frail. It means learning to pause before reacting, to live with compassion, to consider long-term consequences, not just short-term gains. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha told his young monks, "Virtue, concentration, and wisdom are not reserved for the old. They're for anyone who understands that life is impermanent." And the sad truth is, many people only return to the Dharma after loss, when their health declines, when loneliness creeps in, And only then do they realize, if only I had lived differently, sooner. It's never too late. But if we have a choice, let's start today. Before everything falls apart, a human life is an accumulation. If you plant anger, you'll harvest loneliness. If you plant compassion, you'll harvest peace. No one becomes a respected elder by chance. They are forged through a lifetime of mindful choices, word by word, thought by thought, action by action. Integrity doesn't come from books. It shows in how we treat others. Wisdom doesn't come from age. It comes from insight and the courage to let go of ego. Compassion doesn't come from sweet words, but from true understanding. And if we don't develop these things early on, then we'll grow old in body, but not in spirit. We'll have gray hair, but still react like children. Still cling, still demand, still complain. Becoming a wise elder is a lifelong path. And it isn't just for the elderly. It's for anyone awake enough to see beyond self-interest, to live with depth, to prepare a foundation for old age without regret. So if you're in your 32nd, now is the time to plant seeds of compassion and clarity. If you're in your 42nd, now is the time to nurture inner depth. If you're over 50, now is the time to share your experience with tenderness. And if you're in your 62nd or beyond, now is the time to rest in peace, knowing you've already sown what needs to be sown. And now, you can reap the blessings of mindful living. Don't wait until your body gives out to start your practice. Don't wait until you're too tired to be angry to call it letting go. Don't wait for loss to teach you what matters. Live like a wise elder while you're still young. Not old in years, but deep in insight. Not slow in steps, but steady in presence. Not resigned, but free. That way, when old age finally arrives, you'll meet it with peace, not fear, because you've been walking the right path all along. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this reflection. Perhaps by now, you've seen that old age isn't a destination, it's a result. A result of every thought, every habit, every moment you've lived and how you've chosen to respond to life from the very beginning. If today you can begin living as someone who has already weathered many storms, who sees with depth, responds with patience, and chooses stillness in a noisy world, then by the time age arrives, you won't be afraid, because in your heart, peace will already be there. And in your gaze, the depth of wisdom and compassion will quietly shine. Maturity, forgiveness, the ability to teach by presence, these don't appear by accident. They are the fruit of a life lived awake, of daily practice, of returning to yourself again and again. And no matter your age, right now, today, is a beautiful day to begin. You don't have to wait for gray hair to learn how to be gentle. You don't have to wait for loss to learn how to be grateful. If this message touched something deep in you, please subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel so we can continue walking this path together. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and leave a comment below. Your words might just touch someone's heart, the way we've connected right here, right now. May your day be peaceful, and may each breath bring you closer to clarity.